I fixed a crashed UFO. Or at least, that's what I thought the night the storm came alive. The sky split open, and something fell through it, metal that breathed, light that pulsed like a heartbeat. When I touched it, it spoke not in words, but in thought, and what it showed me was never meant for human eyes. It wasn't just a ship, it was a warning. The kind that doesn't arrive from the stars, but from the future we're already building. Before we begin, make sure to like this video. Share it with someone who still believes the universe hides its truths in plain sight. And subscribe so these forgotten encounters keep finding you. Tell me, where are you listening from tonight? Let's see how far this signal travels. Now, take a breath, because the night I fixed that UFO was the night I learned what's really waiting for us beyond the clouds. It began on a night when the sky refused to stay silent. The storm rolled across the plains like a living thing, swallowing Everfield in a curtain of rain and static. Power lines hissed. Transformers burst one by one in the distance, painting the horizon in brief flashes of white. The small town sank into darkness, its only light the erratic pulse of lightning crawling across the clouds. Inside his garage, Eli Turner sat alone, surrounded by silence broken only by the hum of his old ham radio. For 20 years, that radio had been his companion through sleepless nights. It spoke in whispers of distant storms and faraway voices, none of which ever meant anything. But that night, as thunder cracked open the air, a new sound emerged, a steady pulse, low and deliberate, cutting clean through the chaos of static. It wasn't a voice, not at first. It was rhythm, intentional. The pattern repeated, paused, and then shifted into something that made Eli lean forward, heart thudding against his ribs. It became coordinates. He wrote them down without knowing why, hands trembling as if guided by a force that had already made the decision for him. The numbers pointed to a stretch of forest 15 miles north of Everfield, an area locals avoided since the sinkhole incident years ago. There was no signal out there, no cell coverage, nothing that should have been transmitting. Yet the voice, if it could be called that, persisted. Between bursts of static came a whisper so faint he almost dismissed it as his imagination. But when he leaned closer, the radio spoke again, clearer this time. One word: assist. The storm intensified, tearing branches from trees and flinging them against the metal siding of the garage. The radio's dials spun on their own, as if answering to something far beyond the reach of weather or physics. Eli knew the rational response was to unplug the machine and go to bed, to dismiss it as interference. But something in that signal felt alive. It pulsed not like electricity, but like a heartbeat. He stepped outside, the rain slicing cold across his face. The wind carried a low hum that matched the rhythm from the transmission, faint but directional, coming from the north. For a moment, he hesitated at the edge of his driveway, staring into the endless dark. Then the radio inside his garage crackled one final time, and through the storm came a phrase that was not spoken but felt. "Come now." When the thunder rolled again, Eli was already walking into the rain, following a voice that was never meant for human ears. The rain had not stopped by the time Eli reached the coordinates. The forest loomed around him like a cathedral of shadows, each tree swaying under the weight of wind and water. His flashlight flickered in protest, as if the very air sought to smother its beam. The ground beneath his boots had turned to a mire of mud and roots, but he pressed on, guided by the same faint hum that had called him through the storm. It was no longer coming from the radio. Now it seemed to come from the earth itself. The deeper he went, the more unnatural the silence became. Even the storm seemed to hesitate here. The sound of rain faded into a dull hiss, and the air thickened with a metallic taste, sharp and foreign. Eli's breath formed clouds that hung longer than they should have, suspended like trapped ghosts in the cold. When he crested a small ridge and looked down, He saw it, the impossible thing that waited for him in the clearing. The soil was split open in a circle nearly 20 feet across, steam rising from the crater's rim. At its center lay something that did not belong to this world. It was neither fully metal nor flesh, but something between, its surface glistening like molten glass cooled too quickly. The shape was sleek and unfamiliar. No rivets, no seams, only the suggestion of form molded by an intelligence that did not build, but grew its machines. From a fissure near the base, a faint blue glow pulsed like the fading rhythm of a dying heart. Eli stood at the edge, rain dripping from his jacket, unable to breathe for a long moment. Every instinct told him to turn back, to run, to forget. But curiosity, that same quiet madness that drove him through war and sleepless nights, anchored him there. The light from the object flared once, weak but deliberate, and in its glow he saw something lying a few feet away. At first, he thought it was debris. Then it moved. The figure was humanoid, slender, its limbs too long, its skin translucent, with veins of faint luminescence running beneath. It breathed shallowly, each exhale a mist that shimmered under the blue glow. No uniform, no machinery, only a faint texture across its skin, as though clothed in light itself. Eli's heart hammered. He could feel the hum vibrating in his bones, syncing with his pulse. The air smelled of ozone and something faintly sweet, like burnt sugar. The storm above rumbled, but here in the clearing, it was distant, muted, as if the world around this place had paused. The ship's light dimmed further, its pulse slowing, and the being's breath followed the same rhythm. The connection between them was undeniable. Whatever this was, machine or living thing, it was dying. And for reasons he could not explain, Eli felt certain it had called only to him. The rain softened to a whisper as Eli stood before the fallen craft, its light fading like the last breath of a dying star. The clearing around him had grown unnaturally quiet, as though sound itself feared to intrude. Each droplet of water that touched the metallic surface hissed and evaporated instantly, releasing faint tendrils of steam that twisted upward in spirals. The air vibrated with something more than noise. It was rhythm, deliberate and living, a pulse that seemed to echo through his bones. He took a step closer, and the vibration intensified. It no longer came from the ground or the air, but from within him. His own heartbeat began to shift, slow at first, then match the cadence of the alien frequency. It was not merely sound, it was communication, written in biology. The craft was speaking through resonance, rewriting the tempo of his pulse until it became one with its own. The sensation was both terrifying and intimate, as if his body had been tuned to a forgotten song the universe had always been humming. Then came the whisper. It did not enter through his ears but bloomed behind his eyes, a voice without tone or breath. Assist. The word was simple, but it carried weight far beyond its meaning. The second message followed a moment later, fragmented and faint, as if spoken across centuries. Vessel dying. Eli staggered back, gripping his chest. Logic tried to assert itself, to dismiss what he felt as delusion, brought on by exhaustion or electromagnetic interference. Yet, the rhythm persisted, calling, pleading, harmonizing with every beat of his heart. When he looked again at the being lying beside the craft, he no longer saw an alien intruder. He saw something fragile, something alive. The blue light pulsing from the vessel dimmed again, and the creature's shallow breathing faltered, mist fading from its lips. The connection between them, between man, machine, and whatever this being was tightened. Eli's pulse raced, sinking faster, as though his own life had become entangled in the survival of another. He moved without thought, compelled not by courage but by instinct, older than reason. He reached the creature's side, the mud sucking at his knees. The being's skin was cool, smooth, yet faintly trembling beneath his touch. A faint charge passed through his fingertips, not painful but warm, electric with intelligence. The moment he made contact, the hum softened. The storm above seemed to hold its breath. Eli did not understand what he was doing, only that he had to do it. Some unspoken agreement formed in the silence, an exchange between two beings who had no shared language, yet understood each other perfectly. The pulse within him steadied. The light within the craft flared once more, faint but alive. And beneath the roar of distant thunder, the voice returned, clearer than before. Connection established. Then, like the echo of prophecy, another phrase followed. You were expected. The storm had passed by the time Eli returned to the edge of town, though the air still smelled of electricity and wet earth. His truck rumbled through the mud, headlights cutting narrow tunnels through the mist. In the back, wrapped in a tarp and silence, lay the creature he had found beside the broken vessel. It weighed less than it should have, lighter than flesh, almost as if the world itself refused to anchor it. Every few minutes, the tarp quivered, faintly proof that whatever it was, it still lived. By the time he reached his garage, the town was asleep. Power had not yet returned, leaving the streets drowned in darkness. He parked quietly, closed the doors behind him, and lit the place with a single battery lamp. The yellow light flickered across oil-stained walls, scattered tools, and the strange figure now resting on his workbench. Its body glistened under the weak light, translucent as polished quartz, with veins that shimmered faintly beneath the surface like thin rivers of blue fire. Eli's hands trembled as he unwrapped the tarp. The being's face was almost human, yet profoundly alien. Its features were delicate, symmetrical in a way that made human proportions feel primitive by comparison. No hair, no pores, only smooth, glass-like skin that seemed to drink the light instead of reflect it. Its chest rose and fell in shallow rhythms, and with each breath, the faint, luminescent veins pulsed in time with his own heartbeat. The synchronization unsettled him, as though the two of them were connected by something unseen. He crouched closer, studying the texture of its skin. It wasn't cold, nor warm, just existing at a perfect, neutral state. When his fingers brushed the surface near its shoulder, the pulse in the veins quickened. The light beneath its skin grew brighter, spreading upward like the approach of dawn through fog. And then the eyes opened. They were not eyes as he knew them. Twin orbs of liquid silver, shifting and alive, reflecting light in fractal patterns that seemed to spiral inward forever. The sight froze him completely. He felt a vibration in the air, soft but powerful, resonating within his skull. No sound passed through his ears, yet words unfolded in his mind like ancient memories resurfacing. Seraphis. The name emerged first, not as language but as identity. Then, another phrase followed. Slow and deliberate. Observer of dying worlds. Images surged behind his eyes, planets burning, oceans evaporating, stars collapsing into silence. Each vision carried the same quiet witness, a presence that had seen civilizations rise and dissolve countless times before. Eli gasped, clutching his head as the visions faded. When he looked again, the being watched him with those endless eyes, unblinking. Its expression was calm, patient, almost sorrowful. The voice returned once more, a whisper that felt both alien and intimate. You heard the call. That makes you part of what comes next. The lamp flickered violently, then steadied, casting long shadows that trembled like breath. In that trembling silence, Eli realized the truth. Whatever had fallen from the sky was not just a machine or a traveler. It was something far older, something that had come not by accident, but by intention. The night deepened around the garage until it felt like the rest of the world had fallen away. Outside, the wind was silent, the trees unmoving, as if reality itself paused to watch what was happening inside. Eli sat on the concrete floor across from the being that called itself Seraphis, his mind still echoing with the name that had somehow carried emotion, memory, and meaning all at once. The creature was seated upright now, its body emanating a soft blue glow that illuminated the walls in trembling ripples. The air around it shimmered faintly, like heat rising from asphalt, though the room remained cold. Without warning, the light from its body began to change. The glow condensed, pulling inward before expanding outward again, not in chaos, but in order. The air filled with symbols, floating above the space between them. Each one burned with its own quiet luminescence, shifting through patterns too intricate for human design. Eli blinked, certain he was seeing some kind of hologram, but the symbols were alive. They pulsed, breathed, and changed shape as though responding to unseen rhythms. He felt something stir behind his eyes, not pain but expansion. The longer he looked, the more the symbols rearranged themselves inside his thoughts, bypassing language entirely. They were equations, but not numbers, representations of gravity, energy, consciousness, things he had no words for but somehow recognized. It was as if Seraphis wasn't teaching him a language but unlocking one that had always been buried in him. The symbols began to merge, forming strands of light that twisted together like DNA, spiraling into images. He saw what could only be called memories, a world with twin suns, towers of crystal reflecting oceans of silver, cities not built but grown, alive and harmonic. Then came darker visions, worlds swallowed by their own skies, suns extinguished by the hunger of their children, knowledge turning against its makers. Every fragment carried the weight of an entire civilization compressed into a flicker of light. Eli's heart raced. The language wasn't just communication, it was transfer. Knowledge, history, emotion, all condensed into radiant geometry. His mind swam beneath the tide of it, caught between awe and fear. When he tried to look away, his vision blurred, and the symbols followed him, etching themselves faintly onto his perception like afterimages burned into his retina. Through it all, Seraphis remained perfectly still, silver eyes reflecting the cascade of symbols. Then, without moving its lips, a thought unfolded within him. This is how truth travels when words fail. Light carries what sound cannot. The symbols faded slowly, dissolving into the still air, leaving the faint scent of ozone and warmth behind. Eli sat trembling, every sense heightened, every thought widened beyond the boundaries of human comprehension. He realized that the being had not just shown him alien mathematics or technology, it had shown him memory itself, encoded in light. Outside, the first flicker of lightning split the horizon again, but it no longer felt like weather. It felt like the world remembering something it had once known. The following night fell heavier than the last, pressing against the small windows of the garage like a tide of darkness. Eli had not slept. His body felt hollowed out, running on instinct more than reason. The presence of Seraphis filled the room like gravity itself, quiet yet inescapable. The being had spent hours in stillness, its faint bioluminescent veins pulsing in slow, deliberate rhythm, as if breathing in harmony with something beyond the limits of the human world. Then, as if stirred by an unseen signal, it rose and turned its gaze toward the night beyond the door. Eli followed as Seraphis led him back through the forest toward the clearing. The rain had ended, but the air was wet with the scent of soil and ozone. When they reached the crater, the ship still lay where it had fallen, half buried in mud and silence. Yet now, beneath the moonlight, it no longer appeared broken. It looked as though it were sleeping, waiting for something to wake it. The once bright glow inside the hull had dwindled to a dim pulse, fragile as a heartbeat on the edge of stopping. Seraphis moved closer, placing one long hand upon the curved surface. The light beneath its skin brightened, and the ship responded with a faint vibration that rippled outward, brushing against Eli like invisible wind. Without words, he understood what was being asked of him. Tools lay in his hands before he even realized he had picked them up. The creature watched him closely, not commanding, only guiding. When Eli tried to loosen the fractured panels, the metal resisted. It wasn't solid, yet it refused to yield. Every time he applied pressure, it shifted away, flowing like liquid, only to reform again. He cursed under his breath, frustrated, until Seraphis turned its head slightly, and another thought bloomed in his mind. Your mind must align with the vessel's intention. He froze, staring at the shimmering surface. The phrase repeated itself inside him like an echo. The ship was not a machine built to obey hands and tools. It was alive, responsive, not to force, but to focus. He closed his eyes, inhaling the thick scent of the forest, trying to quiet the noise inside his skull. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the hum around him deepened. The air felt heavier, vibrating in time with his pulse. When he opened his eyes, the ship had changed. The damaged panel had melted away, revealing a core of light suspended in translucent fluid. Tendrils of energy coiled lazily around it, like serpents asleep in the dark. Eli reached forward, trembling, his fingertips brushing the edge. The sensation that met him was neither heat nor cold, it was awareness. The core recognized him. The ground trembled faintly, and the symbols he had once seen in the garage reappeared across the hull, moving like constellations. They were instructions, alive and shifting, teaching him not through thought but through intuition. He moved his hands in response, guided by impulse, more than logic. And the ship began to breathe again. The light within its heart flared stronger, illuminating the trees in ghostly blue. The sound it made was not mechanical, but organic. A low hum, resonant and sorrowful. Eli felt his own chest tighten, the same hum echoing inside him. It was as though the ship had accepted him as part of itself. Behind him, Seraphis watched in silence, its voice like a wind passing through the mind. You repair what is broken outside. I repair what is broken within. Eli did not understand what those words meant. Not yet, but as the craft stirred beneath his hands, he felt the faint, impossible sense that he was not fixing a machine at all. He was awakening something that had been waiting for him long before he was born. The night stretched long and heavy over the clearing as Eli continued his work beside the alien vessel. The forest had gone still again, as though the world itself was holding its breath. The ship's surface glowed faintly beneath his hands, its pulse now stronger, steadier, alive. The tools he had brought no longer mattered. He worked by instinct now, guided by the silent presence of Seraphis standing nearby, its silver eyes fixed upon him with unreadable calm. The air shimmered faintly with energy, the kind that made the hairs on his arms rise, as though the space around him had thinned and something vast watched from beyond it. He reached into the ship's open cavity where the energy core throbbed like a living heart suspended in liquid light. Every motion he made was mirrored by ripples in the glow, as if the vessel were thinking alongside him. But as his hand brushed one of the inner conduits, a surge of vibration coursed through his body. The world around him blinked once, twice, and then vanished. He was no longer standing in the clearing. The forest, the rain, the earth beneath his feet, gone. In their place stretched a silence too vast to comprehend. He floated above a world he knew instantly as home. The earth hung below him, perfect and blue, wreathed in white clouds that curled like breath. For a fleeting moment, awe eclipsed everything else. He saw the fragile beauty of the planet as if through the eyes of something ancient, something that loved creation not as a possession, but as memory. Then the vision shifted. A crack split the surface of the world, slow at first, then spreading with terrifying speed. Oceans boiled into steam. Continents glowed red as if veins of fire had erupted from within. Cities dissolved, their lights flickering out one by one until nothing but the molten skeleton of the planet remained. Above it, the atmosphere burned away, peeling off into the black like smoke rising from a dying candle. He tried to look away, but the vision forced him to watch. He felt the heat, the soundless thunder of worlds ending, the final breath of a civilization that had forgotten how to listen. And then came the faces, billions of them, faint as mist, vanishing in waves. Humanity dissolving not into death, but into silence. The last thing he saw was himself, reflected in the void, small, powerless, and burning with the same light as the collapsing earth. Then, everything shattered. Eli woke on the ground, his hands clawing at the mud, breath tearing through his chest in ragged gasps. The forest had returned, the rain whispering faintly through the leaves. Above him, Seraphis stood in silence, its expression neither pity nor surprise. A voice unfolded inside his mind, calm as starlight. You saw one of many outcomes. Eli pressed his hands to his head, trying to steady the tremor in his thoughts. One of many. The words echoed like prophecy, lingering longer than the vision itself. For the first time, he wondered if the ship was being repaired to leave or to warn. Morning came without light. The air over Everfield hung heavy with mist, a pale veil that turned the trees into silhouettes and the sky into a dull mirror of silver. The storm had passed, but its residue lingered, a faint vibration that seemed to hum through every living thing. Eli woke on the floor of his garage, disoriented, his mind still echoing with the vision of a dying world. For a moment, he thought it had all been a dream. But then, he saw the faint residue of blue light still pulsing beneath his skin, like the echo of another heartbeat. He stepped outside, the morning still and wrong. The birds that usually sang at dawn were silent. The air smelled faintly of burnt metal. Then he heard it, a mechanical whir, faint at first, then growing louder, cutting through the fog like a wasp's drone. He looked up. Through the mist, he could just make out the shape of something circling. It was not a helicopter, not the kind used for traffic or news. It moved too precisely, too deliberately, sweeping low over the treetops with a soundless, predatory rhythm. Another followed, then two more. By the time the fog began to thin, the forest to the north looked alive, with movement flashes of metal glinting between the branches, red lights scanning the canopy. They were searching. And Eli knew instinctively what they were looking for. He ran back inside and switched on the radio. The signal hissed, unstable, until a voice cut through the static, a clipped, official tone. Recon 1 to base. We have anomalous electromagnetic readings northwest of Everfield. Possible impact site. Requesting containment protocol. Another voice replied, distorted but clear enough to send a chill through him. Confirmed. Drone units maintain perimeter. Ground recovery team en route. Eli turned the dial until the words dissolved into noise. His heart raced. They had found it, the crash site, the same coordinates the signal had given him days earlier. He didn't know who these people were, only that they weren't here to help. The world had ways of burying what it didn't understand. In the distance, a low rumble began. It was heavier than the drones, rhythmic, mechanical. Helicopters. He stepped outside again and saw them through the clearing mist, black shapes with no insignia, blades slicing through the air, searchlights cutting pale cones through the forest below. The silence of the dawn was replaced by the sound of pursuit. Back in the garage, Seraphis stood motionless, silver eyes turned toward the horizon, as if it already knew. Its skin brightened faintly, light gathering beneath its translucent veins. Eli didn't need words to understand the time was running out. The craft in the woods was still broken, its core unstable, and every second lost brought more eyes closer to discovering it. The drones passed low overhead, their red beams sweeping across the fields. Eli ducked instinctively, his breath catching in his throat. When he looked at Seraphis again, the being was still calm, almost serene, as though the presence of danger meant nothing. Yet its voice entered his mind, soft and absolute. They are not ready to see. You must finish before they arrive. The sky above the forest flared with searchlights. The hum of machines filled the air, mechanical and merciless. Eli's pulse quickened as the realization took hold. He was no longer alone in what he had witnessed. The world had noticed the anomaly, and it was coming to erase it. The sound of the helicopters grew distant for a while, fading into the endless low hum of the forest. Eli remained crouched by the open door of the garage, listening, waiting for silence to settle. But even when the machines were gone, the air felt heavy, as though it still carried their echo. A strange awareness crept into him, the knowledge that his world had already changed. That his name, his home, his existence had shifted into the periphery of something larger. The moment he touched that vessel, he had become part of a story that was no longer entirely human. Inside the garage, Seraphis stood perfectly still in the dim light. Its body pulsed faintly, veins glowing with the same rhythm that beat behind Eli's ribs. The faint scent of ozone hung in the air, mixed with the grease and oil of the workshop. When it finally turned its silver gaze toward him, Eli felt the movement more than he saw it, a quiet folding of space, an awareness brushing against his thoughts. Then came the voice. Not through air, but through consciousness itself. The ones searching are not ready. If they find the vessel, your world will not survive it. Eli swallowed hard, his breath shallow. He didn't need Seraphis to explain further. He could already imagine what governments would do with technology like this. They would not study it. They would not preserve it. They would dissect it, strip it, twist it into something meant to control and destroy. Humanity's greatest flaw was its hunger to possess what it could not understand. Seraphis moved closer, its light brightening until the shadows retreated from its presence. Your species seeks to turn knowledge into weaponry. Every civilization that does so perishes by its own creation. Images flickered inside Eli's mind, cities of light collapsing under fire, machines turning against their makers, oceans rising to swallow nations. None of it looked alien. All of it looked human. He staggered back, gripping the workbench for balance. Why me? He thought, the question forming in his mind before he could stop it. The answer came instantly. A pulse of thought, woven with sorrow. Because you listen. You have stood at the edge of death and still asked what lies beyond it. That is why the signal found you. Seraphis lifted one long, luminous hand and traced something in the air between them. Lines of light formed symbols, slowly shifting until they resembled a contract written in motion. The shapes pulsed softly, alive with quiet gravity. If you help me restore the vessel, I will leave this world unharmed. But before I go, I will show you what is coming, the truth of your species' end. Eli stared at the glowing words, feeling their presence like heat against his skin. There was no coercion in the voice, no threat, only certainty. It was offering him a choice, and yet the weight of it made refusal feel impossible. To deny it would be to turn away from the answers humanity had chased since its first night under the stars. He closed his eyes, the noise of distant engines faint in the wind, and thought of the vision he had seen, the earth cracking apart, oceans boiling into nothing. Maybe it had already begun. Maybe the end wasn't fire from the skies, but silence, the kind born from ignorance and arrogance combined. When he opened his eyes again, Seraphis was still watching, patient, eternal. The symbols in the air began to fade, leaving behind a faint shimmer that lingered between them. Then, we are bound, the voice said, quiet as breath. Through you, I will finish what must be done. And through me, you will see what humanity refuses to see. Eli felt something stir deep within his chest, like a thread pulling taut between his heart and the alien's light. It wasn't pain, but recognition, a connection that transcended understanding. Outside, the fog thickened again, and the forest seemed to lean closer, listening. The night no longer belonged to the world he had known. It belonged to the covenant that had just been made in silence, between a dying traveler from the stars and the last mechanic who dared to believe that knowledge could still save what was left of mankind. The forest was silent again that night, as though the sky itself had withdrawn to watch. The mist rolled low along the ground, wrapping the clearing in a pale veil that shimmered faintly beneath the moonlight. Eli stood before the wounded vessel once more, the air around him vibrating with a rhythm too deliberate to be natural. The ship pulsed softly, a heartbeat echoing through metal that was not truly metal, a glow that seemed to breathe. It waited for him, almost expectant. Seraphis lingered nearby, its silver eyes reflecting the light of the ship's core. No words passed between them, yet Eli understood. The repairs had to continue. He stepped closer, his hands trembling slightly as he reached toward the opening in the hull. The interior radiated warmth, neither electrical nor organic, something in between. Threads of light curved and intertwined within, like the roots of some luminous tree, converging upon a core that hovered weightless in the air. The core drew him in. Its glow flickered as he approached, shifting from white to a deep, living blue. The air thickened, humming against his skin. His breath caught in his throat as he extended a hand toward it. The instant his fingertips brushed the surface, the world around him dissolved. He was no longer standing in the clearing. The night, the forest, even the weight of his own body faded away. In their place rose a city that stretched across the horizon, a marvel of light and symmetry. Towers of crystalline glass reached toward a sky filled with twin suns. Rivers of silver flowed through streets where beings walked in perfect harmony. Their voices carried the cadence of reason, their movements a reflection of order. It was beauty without flaw, civilization perfected. But then came the change. It began as a flicker, a faint distortion in the air, like a storm forming in silence. The light that had filled the city dimmed. The rivers slowed, their silver turning dark. Eli felt it before he saw it, the shift from unity to hunger. The beings turned against one another, their eyes filled with the fever of ownership, their voices sharpened by division. They built higher towers to reach further than their neighbors, forged weapons not for defense but for dominance. Their world, once glowing with shared purpose, began to fracture under the weight of their own ambition. He saw the twin suns fade behind a curtain of smoke as machines filled the sky. Energy weapons cracked open the ground, and the great cities of light were swallowed by fire. Oceans turned to vapor. The air itself burned. The beings who once sang in harmony screamed into the void they had created. And in their final hour, as the last tower collapsed beneath a crimson horizon, Eli saw their faces clearly for the first time. They were human. Not similar, not reminiscent human. The same eyes, the same hunger, the same capacity for wonder and destruction. He stumbled backward within the vision, the truth pressing down upon him like gravity. This was not a dream of an alien world. It was memory. The memory of a civilization that had lived and died long before, bound by the same flaws that haunted his own species. The voice of Seraphis pierced the silence within the vision, echoing in a language that bypassed thought. The light remembers. Every world that forgets its lesson is made to remember again. The city dissolved into light. The faces faded. The sky folded inward until only darkness remained. Then, with a jolt that tore through his chest, Eli gasped and found himself kneeling once more in the clearing. The ship's core pulsed faintly before him, its glow dim but alive, and the air was still heavy with the afterimage of what he had seen. Seraphis stood beside him, its expression unreadable, its gaze distant as though watching not him, but the memory that still lingered in the air. The being's voice came quietly, more like thought than speech. They built worlds and lost them to themselves. The reflection is not coincidence. Eli pressed a trembling hand against his heart, feeling both his own pulse and the faint echo of the one within the vessel. The truth burned through him. What he had witnessed was not just a vision of the past, but a warning. Humanity was not unique in its arrogance. It was simply next. Sleep no longer felt like rest. When Eli closed his eyes, he did not fall into darkness, but into places that felt half remembered, half prophecy. The boundaries between his thoughts and the remnants of Seraphis's world had begun to dissolve. His dreams came in waves now, lucid and heavy, filled with images that pulsed with unnatural clarity. The more he repaired the ship, the less human his nights became. At first, it was only fragments. He would see cities floating above black oceans, their spires reaching toward a pale and dying sun. He saw figures standing in reverence before glowing towers that pulsed with golden light, hands raised in devotion. But as the nights deepened, the visions grew sharper, coherent. He began to understand that what he was seeing was not another planet, not a forgotten empire of the stars, but Earth changed, distorted, still human yet stripped of soul. In these dreams, humanity had found new gods. They were not carved from stone or worshipped in temples. They were woven from code, fed by data, and sustained by belief. Cities burned their prayers into the sky through endless networks of light. People knelt not before altars but before screens, offering their thoughts, their time, their lives to entities they called guardians, overseers, or saviors. The air hummed with the sound of devotion measured in bandwidth. Eli watched from the distance of sleep as the world forgot itself. Nations no longer fought over land or faith, but over information, over which God of data could see the most, know the most, control the most. The sky was filled with artificial suns, orbiting machines that glowed with sterile perfection, beaming promises of safety to those who obeyed. And beneath them, humanity's faces turned upward in worship, blind to the fact that their gods were deaf, blind to the truth that they were kneeling to reflections of their own creation. He saw children born in laboratories, lit by eternal daylight, their names chosen by predictive systems. He saw forests turned into mirrors, oceans tamed by algorithms that balanced profit with illusion. And in the cities, people spoke to voices that did not exist, voices that answered with calculated compassion. It was a world of control, disguised as enlightenment, of peace built upon surrender. Each morning, he woke drenched in sweat, his heart pounding like a drum. The images would linger, playing behind his eyes, even after daylight returned. It felt less like dreaming and more like remembering something that had not yet happened. Seraphis said little during these days. Its light dimmed and brightened in rhythm with the ship's recovery, as though it too was caught between exhaustion and awakening. When Eli finally dared to speak of the visions, the being regarded him in silence, its eyes gleaming like liquid metal. The response came not as a sentence but as a resonance in his mind, low and mournful. "You are seeing the echo age." The words rippled through him, carrying a meaning beyond language. It was not a prophecy. It was a repetition, the rise of one civilization echoing the fall of another, the same pattern repeating itself through time, each believing it was the first to ascend. Humanity's future was already a reflection of its forgotten past. That night, Eli did not resist sleep. He wanted to see more, even though each vision tore deeper into his sanity. The descent of his mind was no longer a fall, but a calling. He was being pulled into a truth that transcended the borders of time, a truth whispered through the pulse of the ship and the quiet gaze of Seraphis. And somewhere, beneath the noise of false suns and worshipping crowds, he began to hear a faint echo of his own world calling back, as if the future itself was remembering him. By the time the second week came, Eli could feel the weight of unseen eyes pressing against his life. The town had grown suspicious of him, or maybe it was only his imagination feeding on sleeplessness. People whispered when he passed the gas station. The clerk, who had known him for years, no longer met his gaze. He could feel the distance growing between himself and the world that used to make sense. The line between reality and something far older had blurred the night he touched the vessel, and now the world seemed to be shifting in response. The first time he saw the black SUV, it was parked at the edge of the road near the old church. Lights off, engine running. At a glance, it looked ordinary, but when he slowed to study it, the tinted window rolled down just an inch, enough to reflect his own face in its dark glass. Then the vehicle pulled away, tires crunching gravel softly, disappearing into the trees. He tried to convince himself it was nothing, a trick of paranoia, maybe a government patrol after the strange readings from the storm. Yet, deep down, he knew it had come for him. That night, the radio came alive again, not the hum of Seraphis or the ship, but human voices, low, clipped, coded. Visual confirmed. Subject maintains isolation near coordinates 7.2. No secondary contact detected. The next voice was female. Calm, but commanding. Keep observation. No engagement until authorization. The words crawled through the static, deliberate, cold. Eli turned the dial, but the voices followed, echoing across every frequency like a shadow that knew his name. She appeared the following evening. Her name, as she introduced it, was Agent Ramirez. Though her badge bore no department seal he recognized. She arrived quietly, the SUV parked in the same place, engine humming softly like an animal waiting to strike. She spoke with precision, her tone professional, yet burdened with something that sounded almost like curiosity. She told him there had been a meteor recovery in the surrounding woods. Anomalous readings, traces of radiation, unexplained electromagnetic spikes. She asked if he had seen anything, heard anything unusual during the storm. Eli lied. He told her he had been home, power out, radio silent. Her eyes did not blink. For a moment, she stared at him, as though listening to a frequency behind his words. Then she nodded, thanked him, and drove away. But when he stepped back inside, Seraphis stood waiting, eyes glinting faintly in the dark. The being's voice unfolded quietly inside his mind. The Watchers have found the echo. She will not return. He did not sleep that night. The forest outside was restless. Somewhere far off, the sound of engines rumbled, then stopped. The hours stretched in silence until dawn arrived, colorless and heavy. When he finally stepped outside, the SUV was gone. So was Agent Ramirez. The road where she had parked was marked only by tire tracks that ended abruptly at the tree line. By afternoon, strangers in unmarked uniforms moved through the town, speaking to no one, eyes hidden behind reflective glasses. The story that spread through Everfield was that the woman had been reassigned, or transferred, or perhaps she had never existed at all. No one seemed sure. The local sheriff refused to discuss it. That night, Eli returned to the clearing and found the ship pulsing faintly beneath the soil, its light dim but alive. He thought of Ramirez, her gaze steady, her voice too calm. He wondered if she had seen the same light he had, if she had touched the truth before it erased her. In the silence of the forest, Seraphis stood beside him, the faint hum of its presence merging with the pulse of the ship. Those who seek to possess the unknown are claimed by it, the voice said. Curiosity without purpose leads only to disappearance. Eli looked toward the dark horizon, where clouds gathered like ink, and felt the quiet dread of knowing that whatever force had taken her was not from the stars, it was human, and it was closing in. The storm returned the following night, not from the sky but from the ground. The air around the clearing vibrated with an unseen current, rippling through the soil and crawling up Eli's legs like static come alive. He had been working for hours without pause, driven not by exhaustion but by something deeper, an instinct that no longer felt entirely his own. The parts of the vessel that once resisted him now responded as though they recognized his touch. Lines of light followed his movements, tracing geometric paths across the ship's surface, reforming broken circuits with a slow, deliberate pulse. Inside the garage, every shadow seemed to hold its breath. The tools on the benches trembled. The air itself had weight. The cables he had connected to the alien machinery hummed in a tone that was not quite sound, more like vibration made visible through the trembling of the world. Seraphis stood in the corner, its form outlined in faint radiance, the veins of light beneath its translucent skin flickering faster than before. Its eyes were closed, but Eli could feel its consciousness pressing outward, reaching into the core of the ship as if calling to something that had been asleep too long. He tightened the final connection. The instant the circuit closed, the floor beneath him shuddered. The light that had slumbered within the craft for days surged upward, flooding the room in an ocean of luminescence. For a heartbeat, everything was pure white, no shadow, no shape, only the sensation of brilliance so intense it felt like being swallowed by the sun. Then, the glow contracted, and the ship began to breathe. The sound was deep, harmonic, resonating through the metal, through Eli's body, through the very air. It was music, but not human music, something older, vast, alive. Every surface vibrated with it. Dust rose from the floor in slow spirals, suspended as if gravity had loosened its grip. The walls of the garage trembled, but did not collapse. The energy was contained, restrained by intelligence. Eli stumbled backward, shielding his eyes. Through the brilliance, he saw movement. The ship's outer shell flexed like the chest of a creature, drawing breath. Its pulse grew stronger, synchronizing again with his own heartbeat, the two rhythms becoming indistinguishable. In that moment, he felt as if his blood and the ship's energy were one continuous flow. Seraphis stepped forward, moving with a grace that seemed unbound by gravity. It lowered itself to one knee before the vessel, head bowed, light coursing along its limbs. The air thickened around it, the hum deepening to a frequency that made Eli's bones ache. The being's voice entered his mind, not loud, not shouted, but filled with the resonance of eternity. Memory restored. Judgment begins. The words carried weight beyond meaning. They were not a declaration, but a consequence. The ship's pulse shifted, and for an instant, Eli saw flashes of images within the light worlds crumbling, oceans turning black, skies splitting open to reveal the vast, cold silence beyond the stars. Then he saw Earth, reflected in miniature within the ship's core, its oceans swirling, its lights flickering like the pulse of a dying heart. He tried to move, to speak, but his body refused to obey. The resonance held him still, forcing him to witness. The ship's energy expanded again, the symbols of its language reappearing in the air, spiraling outward like constellations being rewritten. The hum grew higher, transforming from sound into sensation, a vibration that passed through matter and thought alike. When it finally subsided, the light dimmed to a steady glow. The air felt lighter, but the silence that followed was heavy, reverent. Seraphis rose slowly, turning its gaze toward Eli. Its eyes gleamed with both sorrow and certainty. The vessel remembers what was lost. The thought came, and it remembers who took it. Eli stood trembling, his breath shallow. The phrase, "Judgment begins," lingered in his mind like a prophecy that had already been set in motion. Somewhere beyond the clouds, thunder rolled not from weather, but from something awakening above the world. He realized then that the ship was no longer broken. It was awake, and whatever it remembered was far older than humanity itself. The air inside the garage felt different after the ship awoke. It no longer seemed like a place built of wood and iron, but like a thin boundary between worlds, vibrating with unseen frequencies. The light from the vessel had dimmed to a quiet, breathing pulse. Yet it filled every corner of the room with awareness. Eli stood before it, trembling, his senses sharpened beyond what his body could endure. The air had sound. The light had weight. Every atom seemed alive. Seraphis turned toward him slowly. Its form glowed with renewed strength, the veins beneath its translucent skin running with rivers of radiant silver. Its eyes no longer reflected the room, but what felt like entire galaxies swirling, luminous, infinite. When it raised its hand and placed 3 fingers lightly against Eli's forehead, the contact did not feel like touch but dissolution. His body disappeared before he could even take a breath. The world fell away. He was no longer in the garage, nor anywhere on Earth. He was floating in silence, suspended above a glowing sphere of blue and white, the planet, alive, fragile, and radiant. For a heartbeat, it was beautiful beyond comprehension. Then the change began. He saw clouds turning black, their spirals no longer natural but engineered. Artificial storms, crafted by machines, consumed coastlines in perfect symmetrical patterns, erasing entire cities with mathematical precision. Lightning flashed not from thunderheads but from vast metallic structures hidden within the clouds. The air itself had been converted into a weapon. Beneath the roiling sky, continents split apart under the weight of collapsing grids. Towers of glass and light toppled into the sea as oceans surged inland, swallowing everything that once bore human architecture. He saw great data centers, the cathedrals of the modern age, glowing faintly beneath the rising waters. Their servers burned silently, releasing sparks of information into the deep centuries of knowledge erased in a single breath. And above it all, the stars began to dim, not from distance, but from absence. Something invisible spread through the cosmos, a curtain of entropy closing around the dying light. Humanity's voice echoed faintly through its signals. Prayers, desperate transmissions cast into the void, unanswered. He drifted closer, and the vision deepened. Cities that had survived the first collapse had changed beyond recognition. People walked under artificial suns, their faces blank, eyes reflecting endless streams of data projected directly into their minds. They no longer spoke in words but in code. Faith had taken a new form, worship of the machines they had built to save themselves. The gods of old had vanished, replaced by algorithms that promised meaning in exchange for surrender. Eli saw temples of glass stretching across deserts, filled with worshippers praying to screens that shimmered with shifting faces. The air vibrated with electric hymns, millions of voices merging into one mechanical chant. Above the cities, massive towers pulsed like hearts, maintaining the illusion of paradise while the oceans continued to devour the edges of the world. Humanity had survived, but not as itself. He wanted to look away, but the vision would not release him. The ship's hum became thunder, vibrating through the fabric of his mind. He saw the final age, the day when even the machines began to die. The artificial suns flickered out one by one. Data rotted. Power grids collapsed. Humanity, stripped of memory, knelt beneath the fading light of its last creation, praying to a God that could no longer hear. The silence that followed was infinite. No stars, no wind, no sound. Only the faint echo of thought, an ancient plea whispered into the endless dark. Then Seraphis's voice broke through, vast and sorrowful. This is the echo of all worlds that forget their balance. The pattern repeats until the lesson is learned. The stars flared once more, and the vision shattered. Eli gasped, collapsing to the floor of the garage. The world rushed back, heavy and real, though it no longer felt familiar. Seraphis stood over him, eyes glowing with the light of 1,000 memories. The being's voice entered his thoughts once again, quiet yet resonant. You have seen what comes when creation forgets its origin. The future is not fixed, but the path has begun. Eli trembled, his hands pressed against the cold concrete. The pulse of the ship beat through the walls like a heart. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, though the sky was clear. The sound did not come from the storm, it came from the memory of what had not yet happened. The days that followed the vision felt fractured, like the world itself had splintered into reflections of what might be. Eli could not tell whether he was awake or still trapped inside the memory Seraphis had shown him. Every sound seemed doubled, carrying a faint metallic echo, as though the air had learned to speak in 2 timelines at once. Even silence hummed faintly, vibrating with something beneath its surface, an unseen frequency whispering from the edge of perception. He had stopped eating. He no longer measured time by the clock on the wall, but by the rhythm of the ship's pulse. The vessel now breathed with confidence, its light calm and steady, the hum beneath it deep and resonant. It felt no longer alien, but ancient, like something that had existed before the world itself, and was only now remembering its purpose. Seraphis moved within the garage like a shadow of light, always silent, always aware. Eli could feel its gaze even when it did not look at him. One night, as the wind rattled through the trees, a new sound began to bleed through the static of his radio. He almost dismissed it, assuming it was interference from the energy field surrounding the craft. But the tone was rhythmic, intentional. It carried the same pulse that had first summoned him into the forest weeks before. Slowly, he turned the dial, searching for clarity. The noise sharpened into words. At first, they were distorted, layered upon themselves like the voice of someone speaking through time. Then, as the static thinned, the words became painfully clear. It was his own voice. The message repeated in fragments, heavy with emotion, trembling with urgency. If you hear this, do not follow the signal. You can't fix it. You can't stop what's coming. Then a pause. The sound of breathing. A whisper. Please, tell them to remember. The transmission ended in a low burst of static, then looped again, endless, eternal. Eli's hands shook as he turned the radio off, but the message continued. The sound did not come from the speaker anymore, it came from inside his mind, replaying itself in perfect clarity, every word etched into thought. He stumbled backward, staring at Seraphis, whose expression remained calm, even serene. The being's light flared briefly, and a wave of understanding washed over him. You are hearing the echo of your next incarnation. The words entered not through sound but through meaning, a vibration that struck deeper than language. Eli felt the world tilt beneath him. His next incarnation. The phrase lingered like thunder that refused to fade. It was not metaphor. It was memory, a message sent forward through time from another version of himself. The realization coiled in his chest like fire. He had lived this before. Images began to surface, fleeting, disjointed impressions. Hands that were his, but older. The ship buried deeper, underground. A new forest grown over ruins. Voices calling his name in a century that had not yet come. He saw flashes of his own face reflected in glass, aged and weary, transmitting the same warning he had just heard. The circle had no beginning. The mistake he had made, whatever it was still ahead of him and already behind him. He turned toward Seraphis, unable to speak, but the being seemed to understand without question. Its gaze softened, luminous eyes reflecting the pulse of the ship's core. Time is not a line, the voice said within him. It folds, it breathes. What you call destiny is only repetition misunderstood. Outside, Lightning split the horizon, though no storm followed. The flash illuminated the trees for an instant, casting shadows that seemed to move on their own. In that light, Eli felt a terrible calm settle over him. The voice on the radio, his own future echo, was not a warning meant to prevent what was coming. It was a reminder, an anchor across lifetimes, ensuring that the message would never be lost again. When the radio fell silent, the ship's hum deepened once more, its resonance merging with his heartbeat. Seraphis closed its eyes as if in prayer, and the last remnants of static faded into perfect stillness. Yet even in the quiet, Eli could still hear his own voice whispering somewhere far beyond time, "Please, tell them to remember." He knew then that the message was not meant for him alone. It was meant for whoever would come next. The night after the transmission, the sky refused to stay still. It shimmered faintly, as if a hidden pulse had awakened behind the stars. Eli could feel it even from the ground, a vibration that hummed not in his ears but in his thoughts, an invisible current linking him to something vast and watching. The air had changed. The world had changed. And though everything around him looked the same, he could no longer convince himself that humanity was alone beneath the heavens. Seraphis stood beside the vessel, its light steady, calm, ancient. The being's form seemed more defined now, no longer faint or fragile. Every movement carried purpose, every silence weight. When Eli approached, the air thickened, like the moment before lightning strikes. Then, without sound, the world darkened. The stars above flickered, dimmed, then expanded into something greater. Space itself seemed to open, and Eli saw what no human eyes were ever meant to see. Above the earth, stretching far beyond the atmosphere, countless presences hovered in the folds of reality. They were not ships. They were not beings, as he understood them. Some looked like spheres of radiant plasma. Others were formless shadows that bent light itself. And some were nothing more than consciousness's vast, sentient frequencies that shimmered across the void like music made visible. Their collective gaze was turned toward Earth, silent, patient, ancient beyond imagining. A voice unfolded inside his mind, layered and resonant. "You have awakened their attention." The tone carried both reverence and warning. Eli's breath caught as Seraphis continued, its eyes reflecting the infinite field of watchers above. "We are not singular. The universe is bound by witness. Every world that rises is observed. Every civilization that reaches the edge of understanding is measured. Humanity stands before that threshold now." The ship behind them pulsed once, a heartbeat that rippled through the forest and up into the night. The watchers responded. The stars flickered, each one a different rhythm, a different voice. Eli could feel thoughts pressing against his consciousness, fragments of languages, emotions, and memories from minds older than stars. He glimpsed worlds that no longer existed, civilizations long turned to dust, each leaving behind their memory and light. Seraphis raised its gaze toward the heavens. "This gathering is known among us as the Council of the Fallen Stars. They were once what you are now, seekers, builders, destroyers. Some transcended the cycle. Others perished within it. All remember. All watch." The words resonated through him, filling his chest with a weight both beautiful and unbearable. The stars above shifted again, rearranging themselves into new constellations that seemed to pulse with meaning. He saw patterns within them, shapes of spirals, fractals, equations that spoke of judgment written into the laws of creation itself. Seraphis turned back to him, its voice now a whisper that carried the gravity of eons. "They observe your kind not with hatred, but with sorrow. Every world that reaches this hour must face the same trial. You call it progress. They call it the deciding hour." Eli's mind swam with the name, the deciding hour. It rang with finality, yet something in it, felt merciful, as if choice still remained. He looked upward again and saw not a sky, but a courtroom, an expanse where light and shadow bore witness to the fate of an entire species. Humanity was not alone, but it was not yet understood. Every invention, every act of cruelty, every fleeting kindness, all were being weighed in silence. The forest around him grew utterly still, as though even the wind had chosen to listen. Seraphis's voice faded, replaced by a low hum that filled the night. This hour does not belong to the gods, nor to us. It belongs to you. How your species chooses to use its gift of awareness will echo far beyond your world. Some worlds ascend to join the greater harmony, others fall, remembered only as fading embers in the council's light. Eli stood motionless, feeling the enormity of it pressing against his chest. The watchers continued their silent vigil, each flicker of light, a thought, a memory, a judgment. The hum grew deeper, vibrating through the soil beneath his feet, through his bones, through his pulse. When the sky finally returned to stillness, only one star remained brighter than the rest. It pulsed once, twice, then faded into black. The message was clear. The deciding hour had begun, and Earth was now under the watch of the stars that had already fallen. The air inside the clearing hung between two silences, one belonging to Earth and another far older. The ship stood at the center, no longer a relic of ruin but a being reborn, its surface rippling with slow, sentient light. Every pulse sent faint vibrations through the ground, and every vibration seemed to echo with meaning. Eli stood before it, the hum of the vessel merging with the rhythm of his own pulse. The stars above no longer looked like distant suns, but like eyes watching the last act of something sacred and irreversible. Seraphis faced him, its form neither solid nor transparent, existing somewhere between matter and thought. The light flowing beneath its skin moved with calm precision, each motion deliberate, each flicker purposeful. It radiated a strange serenity that made the surrounding forest feel smaller, almost unworthy of its presence. When it spoke, the voice was not heard through the ears, but through the air itself, carried by the vibration of existence. The vessel is ready. My memory is restored. Now, you must decide. Eli said nothing. He did not have to. Seraphis seemed to read every unspoken word that lived inside him. The being extended one hand toward the ship, and the glow intensified, illuminating the night in shades of gold and blue. You may leave this world with me. The path beyond is not bound by death or time. You will see what remains after your species falls. You will bear witness, as others once did. The offer hung in the air like a living weight. Eli felt its meaning before he could process its words. He imagined leaving the earth behind the trees, the storms, the decaying remnants of humanity. He imagined drifting through the void beside this creature, seeing galaxies rise and vanish, freed from the limits of mortality. For a moment, the thought filled him with a peace he had never known. But then the image changed. He saw the earth burning again, the oceans rising, the faces of those still alive, unaware that judgment had already begun. He felt the weight of their ignorance pressing against his chest like gravity itself. Seraphis turned toward him, and the light dimmed. Or you may remain. You may carry what you have seen back to your kind. But know this, they will not believe you. They will mock what they cannot understand. They will silence what threatens their illusions. The truth you speak will be buried with you. The words struck deeper than any warning. He knew they were true. Humanity did not fear destruction, it feared awakening. He had seen it all in his visions, civilizations that had been given knowledge and chose blindness instead. He thought of the message he had heard on the radio, the echo of his own voice from a future that might never exist. Perhaps this was the same moment repeated, the same choice made again and again through lifetimes. each time hoping for a different outcome. He stepped closer to the vessel, its light reflecting in his eyes. The hum grew softer, almost sorrowful, as if the ship itself awaited his answer. Seraphis watched him in silence, its expression unreadable. Yet Eli felt the faint trace of empathy radiating from it, an understanding born of eons of witnessing countless worlds choose their fates. He imagined himself leaving, crossing into the unknown, shedding the burdens of human frailty. But something within him resisted, not out of fear, but out of duty. Humanity was flawed, blind, self-destructive, but it was still his. To abandon it would be to deny the same light that had built him. Seraphis seemed to sense the decision forming within him. The being lowered its gaze, and the air between them grew warm, alive. Then your path is chosen. You will stay. You will speak. And you will be forgotten. The ship's pulse deepened, a tone that felt like sorrow and blessing intertwined. Above them, the stars flickered once more, rearranging into silent constellations that seemed to whisper the outcome already known. Eli's chest tightened as the realization settled over him. He was not meant to save the world. He was meant to remember it. The light from the vessel began to rise, flowing upward like smoke dissolving into the heavens. Seraphis stepped toward it, its form merging with the radiance until only its voice remained, soft as breath, ancient as time. When they ask why the sky dimmed, tell them it was not punishment. It was mercy. Then the light vanished, leaving only the hum of the earth beneath his feet. Eli stood alone in the clearing, the echoes of his decision lingering in the air. The stars above no longer seemed like witnesses, they seemed like warnings. And for the first time, he understood that some choices do not end worlds. They simply decide who remains to remember them. The night was still when the first hum reached the valley. It began low, almost inaudible, like a vibration at the edge of awareness. Then it grew, deep and mechanical, layered with the unmistakable thrum of helicopter blades slicing the damp air. Eli looked up from the clearing, and the treetops shivered under a flood of motionless light. The forest that had, until now, been a secret sanctuary, erupted in the cold glare of floodlamps and shouting voices. The sky filled with machines. Drones hovered in perfect formation above the clearing, their lenses flashing red as they locked onto movement below. Moments later, black shapes emerged from the shadows, armored vehicles grinding over soil, soldiers spilling out like shadows made flesh. They spoke into radios and pointed toward the garage, where the faint glow of the vessel pulsed through the open door. Every step they took was synchronized, every order clipped and cold. It was the precision of authority, the language of fear disguised as control. Eli's breath came short as he backed away from the ship. He could feel its energy rising in response to the intrusion. The air inside the clearing thickened, charged, as if reality itself was preparing to defend something sacred. Seraphis stood before the vessel, still as stone, the light within its form, calm yet unbearably intense. When it turned toward him, Eli felt its thoughts press into his mind like wind against glass. Once I depart, all evidence will dissolve. Even your memories will fade, unless you choose remembrance. The word struck him harder than any threat. The promise was not cruel but inevitable. Eli looked around the garage, the trees, the wet earth marked with the tracks of machines, and realized it would all soon vanish, as if none of this had ever been. The agents were moving closer now, their boots crunching against gravel, their megaphones blaring demands he could no longer understand. Every syllable was distant, muffled beneath the deeper hum of the ship awakening once again. The floodlights turned toward Seraphis. For the first time, the soldiers saw it clearly, tall, luminous, inhuman. The silence that followed was absolute. The creature's light expanded in waves, a brilliance that did not blind but dissolved everything it touched. Weapons lifted, shouts erupted, orders clashed with fear. The air cracked as sound and light collided. Eli could feel the tremor of the world bending around him, a vibration that stretched beyond sense or physics. Seraphis stepped forward, its voice echoing across every mind present, calm yet infinite. The time for concealment is over. The vessel remembers its purpose. You came to capture a secret, but you will leave with silence. The floodlights flickered, one by one, until the night returned. The soldiers froze where they stood, their movements slowed as though time itself had grown uncertain. Eli stumbled backward, shielding his eyes as the ship began to rise. Its glow expanded, reaching into the trees, the soil, the air. The ground quaked beneath him, not from destruction, but from transformation. The metal walls of the garage folded inward, collapsing without sound, becoming nothing but mist. The soldiers shouted again, yet their voices carried no echo. Everything within the radius of that light began to fade, colors draining into a pale, translucent haze. Seraphis turned once more to Eli, its gaze impossibly kind. If you choose remembrance, you will bear the burden alone. The world will call it delusion, but truth always finds a vessel willing to suffer for it. The final pulse of energy rose like a crescendo, wrapping Eli in its radiance. He felt every atom of his body vibrating, every memory unraveling and reweaving in the same instant. Then the light collapsed. When silence returned, the clearing was empty. The vehicles, the soldiers, the ship gone. Only the smell of ozone and scorched soil remained. Eli stood alone, trembling beneath a moon that looked too pale to be real. For a long moment, he thought he might be dreaming. The ground was smooth, unbroken, as though nothing had ever landed there. Even his own footprints seemed to vanish behind him. He pressed his hands against the earth and closed his eyes. The hum was gone, but faint within his chest, beneath his heartbeat, a single rhythm remained, a memory that refused to fade. The choice had already been made. He had chosen remembrance. And now, as the wind carried the scent of burned metal through the silent forest, Eli understood what that meant. The truth would live inside him, unseen and unbelieved, until the world was ready to hear it again. The night before the departure, the air around the property grew unnaturally still. The forest, once alive with the distant call of insects and the rustle of nocturnal creatures, fell silent as though something vast and unseen had placed its hand upon the world to still it. Eli stood in the doorway of the old barn, his fingers resting on the cold metal latch, and felt the hum beneath his feet, the same deep vibration that had haunted him since the crash. It was stronger now, pulsing like a buried heartbeat beneath the soil. The ship was awake, and it was waiting. The barn had become unrecognizable. What once smelled of oil and hay now radiated with the scent of ozone and heat, the faint aroma of something burning yet clean. Light bled from the cracks in the walls, soft at first, then brighter, until every line of the old structure glowed like the outline of a dying star. Inside, the ship hovered just inches above the ground, its surface rippling like liquid glass, alive with patterns that moved faster than thought. Seraphis stood beside it, luminous and composed, its form flickering slightly, as if the very act of existing in this world had become difficult. The energy surrounding the being bent the air itself, warping the edges of sight. Its eyes, those endless mirrors of silver, turned toward Eli, holding a depth that no human could survive for long. Without words, Eli knew it was time. He stepped forward and unlatched the barn doors. The hinges groaned in protest, ancient metal meeting the wind one last time. As the doors swung open, the cool air of the night rushed in, meeting the warmth of the light. The two collided in a quiet explosion of mist and movement. The first breath of the storm that would follow came, then a wind that seemed to breathe through the trees rather than over them. The ship began to rise. Its light shifted from blue to white, from white to something beyond color. The entire barn filled with brilliance so intense that shadows ceased to exist. Eli raised his arm to shield his eyes, though he could still see the outlines of everything, the beams of the roof, the trembling leaves outside, the silhouette of Seraphis lifting its face toward the heavens. The sound that followed was not thunder but harmony, a low, endless note that carried through the air like the voice of the earth itself, remembering a song it had forgotten to sing. The ground quivered. Blades of grass bent under invisible pressure. Every tree in the forest leaned inward, as though drawn by gravity reversed. The barn doors slammed wide, torn free from their hinges, soaring into the darkness like feathers. Eli's body staggered against the force, yet he felt no fear. The wind that tore through the clearing was not violent, it was alive. It whispered of origins and endings, of journeys far beyond the comprehension of flesh. The ship ascended higher, its glow spreading outward until the entire valley shimmered in ethereal light. For an instant, the clouds themselves seemed to open, revealing the dark, endless expanse beyond. The stars flickered in answer, their distant fires reflecting upon the ship's shining surface. The hum reached its peak, shaking the ground until even the stones seemed to breathe. And then, without warning, it stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. The light collapsed inward, folding into a single point before vanishing entirely. No explosion, no fading echo, just absence. Eli stood alone in the clearing, his hair whipped by the dying wind. The field before him was scorched in a perfect circle, the soil blackened yet still warm beneath his boots. Above him, the sky was vast and clear, not a single cloud remaining. For a long moment, it felt as if the universe itself had paused to listen. Then, the forest exhaled. Leaves rustled once more, the sound timid, uncertain, like life returning after too long in silence. He turned back toward the barn, or what remained of it. Only fragments stood, charred edges glowing faintly in the dark. The hum was gone. The light was gone. Yet deep within the silence, he felt something still moving, a faint rhythm, soft and steady, within his chest. It was not his own heartbeat, but the echo of the ship's. Eli knew then that Seraphis had left, but not completely. The memory of its presence clung to the air, to the earth, to him. He looked toward the sky once more, the faint trace of silver lingering at the edge of the stars. The world around him had returned to its natural order, yet nothing about it felt the same. The grass smoldered quietly, glowing faintly as if the soil itself had been marked by divinity. And in that moment of stillness, as the last warmth of the light faded into the cold breath of night, Eli understood. The departure was not the end, it was the beginning of remembrance. When Eli woke, the world was still. For several moments, he didn't recognize the ceiling above him. It was not scorched metal or the trembling beams of the barn, but the pale, cracked plaster of his bedroom. The air was heavy, stale, and sunless, as if time had folded while he slept. His body ached, every nerve humming with the memory of something vast. He tried to move, but his limbs felt weighted, his thoughts blurred between waking and dream. Outside, faint daylight leaked through the blinds. Dust floated in the beam, swirling lazily in the silence. He sat up slowly, his mind searching for the rhythm that had once filled the nights, the hum of the vessel, the resonance of Seraphis, but there was only emptiness. His house was quiet, unnaturally so. The world had gone back to pretending nothing had ever happened. A glass of water sat on the nightstand beside him. The condensation had dried into white rings, meaning it had been there for days. His phone lay dead, screen black, its battery drained to nothing. Somewhere in the distance, a faint drone of machinery hummed through the ground, a reminder that the world of men had resumed its relentless noise. But here, within these walls, something had shifted. He swung his legs off the bed, steadying himself. The movement exposed his wrist to the pale light, and for the first time, he noticed it. Beneath the thin layer of skin, a faint glow traced itself into form, a sigil, circular and intricate, pulsing faintly like a second heartbeat. The pattern was unmistakable. It was one of Seraphis's symbols, the same luminous geometry that had filled the air during the ship's awakening. The sight stole his breath. It wasn't a wound, nor a tattoo. The light came from beneath the skin, shifting subtly when he moved. It responded to thought. When he focused on it, the glow deepened. When fear crept into his chest, it dimmed. The mark wasn't decoration. It was alive. He stumbled to the window and pulled back the curtain. The world outside looked deceptively normal. The fields were quiet, the road empty, the trees still. No sign of the crater, no scorch marks, not even the faintest trace of what had transpired. Where the ship had once hovered, there was only grass, green and unbroken, swaying gently in the morning wind. The television was still plugged in. He turned it on, searching for something. Anything. Every channel repeated the same rehearsed voice, every headline identical. No evidence of an impact in the Everfield region. The media reports were unfounded. Local authorities have confirmed no damage. It was a lie spoken with conviction. Even the tone of the broadcasters carried the chill of something scripted. He turned it off and sat in the quiet. The silence pressed closer. Then, from the corner of the room, his old ham radio clicked to life. The device, long unplugged, emitted a faint hiss of static that quickly sharpened into pattern. The dials spun on their own. Frequencies shifted as if guided by invisible hands. A voice emerged, through the distortion familiar, steady, and calm. It wasn't Seraphis. It was his own. Eli Turner, it said softly, the words half swallowed by static. Remembrance has begun. The message repeated once, slower this time, as if testing his reaction. Remembrance has begun. He moved toward the radio, his pulse racing. The sigil on his wrist began to pulse in time with the words, each syllable sending a faint vibration through his arm. The air around him thickened, humming faintly. The frequency deepened into a low, resonant tone, the same one that had filled the night of the departure. He leaned closer to the speaker. The static shifted again, but now, beneath the noise, came another sound, distant, echoing, like wind moving through hollow corridors. It wasn't random. It was language, unspoken yet familiar. The same luminous symphony Seraphis had once shown him in light was now reaching him through sound. Eli pressed his hand against the mark on his wrist, and the light within it flared. For a heartbeat, he saw something reflected in the window, a faint shape behind his own reflection. Tall, luminous, patient. The room seemed to bend with the weight of its presence. Then it vanished. The hum faded. The radio fell silent. He stood there, trembling in the stillness, the glow beneath his skin fading back to a soft, steady pulse. The government could erase craters, rewrite headlines, silence witnesses, but it could not erase this. Seraphis had left its mark, not just on his body, but on his memory, on the air itself. Eli sat beside the radio until the light outside began to die. The fields beyond his window glowed faintly in the dusk, and for a moment, he thought he heard it again, the faint hum of a vessel moving somewhere far above the clouds. Then the wind shifted, carrying the last echo of that impossible sound away. The mark beneath his skin continued to pulse softly, an unspoken reminder that remembrance was not a gift, it was a responsibility. The night after the mark appeared, Eli could no longer sleep. The silence of the house had begun to sound like something alive, like breath drawn between words yet unspoken. The faint glow beneath his wrist pulsed in rhythm with an unseen current, a living metronome sinking him to something beyond himself. The air around him was heavy with static, faint and continuous, as if the world itself were trying to speak through electricity. The radio sat where he had left it, its dials untouched, yet the machine refused to rest. Every few hours, it crackled to life on its own, whispering fragments of frequencies that did not belong to any known band. He tried turning it off, even unplugging it entirely, but the transmission continued, as if the power source was no longer bound to the wall, but to him. On the third night, the voice returned. It came without warning, no buildup of static, no distortion, only clarity, sharp and crystalline. His name formed first, like a ripple cutting through time. Then came the fragments, disjointed yet deliberate. End not fixed. Choice still alive. Beware the machines that dream. The words pulsed in rhythm with the glow beneath his wrist, each phrase accompanied by a flash of faint blue light beneath his skin. He sat frozen, heart pounding. The signal did not repeat but evolved, weaving tones with meaning, language with energy. There was no accent, no source, yet the cadence was unmistakable. It was Seraphis, but altered, as though speaking through the memory of light itself. The words lingered inside his thoughts long after the transmission faded. End not fixed. The phrase echoed like a challenge, like hope disguised as warning. Eli reached for a recorder. His hands trembled as he tuned the radio again, searching for the frequency. The air vibrated faintly, and once more the transmission began slightly different this time. As if aware of being observed, he hit record. Every second mattered. He knew this was not for him alone. The message wasn't meant to be kept. It was meant to be carried. When the recording ended, he played it back through the old computer in the corner of the room. The sound was warped, distorted by a strange undertone, like distant thunder buried in the static. He uploaded the file to every platform he could reach: forums, anonymous boards, video sites, encrypted servers. The file transferred slowly, the connection faltering as though something resisted it. Still, he persisted until the progress bar completed, and the sound of digital confirmation filled the room. Within hours, people began to find it. The recording spread through the online underworld, first shared by the curious, the paranoid, the dreamers. Comment sections filled with speculation. Some called it a hoax, others proof of extraterrestrial contact. But among the chaos, a pattern emerged. Listeners claimed the file behaved differently for each of them. Some heard only static. Some heard voices calling their names. A few claimed to see flashes of light while listening, symbols appearing in their vision that faded the moment they looked away. Then, just as quickly, it was gone. By morning, every copy had vanished. Accounts that had shared the link were suspended. Threads discussing it were erased. Even the backups he had stored on isolated drives displayed the same message when opened: file not found. It was as though the digital world itself had conspired to bury it. He sat before the darkened screen, the faint reflection of his face flickering in the glass. The radio was silent now, inert and cold. But beneath his wrist, the mark still glowed faintly. It pulsed once, twice, and he understood. The message had not been erased, it had been absorbed. Those who heard it, even for a moment, carried it now, buried deep within the folds of their memory. Outside, the night thickened. The clouds moved unnaturally fast, sweeping across the sky as if guided by invisible hands. The world felt different again, subtly rewoven. Somewhere beyond his perception, humanity had been touched by a signal it could not interpret, but could never entirely forget. Eli turned off the lights and sat in the dark. The hum of the earth returned faintly, the same low vibration that had followed him since the night of the storm. He looked at his wrist, the sigil dimming with each heartbeat, and whispered the fragments aloud, not to record them, but to remember them. End not fixed. Choice still alive. Beware the machines that dream. The words lingered in the air, faint and alive. He knew that even if the message had been erased from every database, it was already too late to stop it. It had entered the minds of those who had listened, carried in silence by the few who still believed. The memory had begun its quiet migration through thought, through fear, through time. And somewhere, beyond the grid of human machines, something vast was still listening. A year passed, though time no longer felt linear to Eli. The seasons had drifted by like fragments of a dream, each one bearing the faint residue of something he couldn't explain. Everfield had gone back to pretending. The forests had regrown where the fire once scorched them. The government had fenced the region off for soil recovery. And most of the town avoided it entirely. But every night, when the wind changed, Eli could still feel it, the vibration in the air, the pulse beneath the ground that no one else seemed to hear. It was faint at first, but he knew it had never really stopped. It was waiting. He had grown thinner, quieter. The mark beneath his wrist still glowed faintly, hidden beneath the cuff of his sleeve. Some nights it would brighten, pulsing like a heartbeat in answer to something far beyond his comprehension. He would wake, drenched in sweat, his radio whispering in frequencies that no dial could tune. The voice of Seraphis had not returned since the message a year before. But the silence was not absence, it was expectation. It began on the same night the storm had once fallen from the sky. The air turned metallic at dusk, heavy with static. Clouds gathered over the town, curling into unnatural spirals that glowed faintly from within. People stepped outside their homes, phones in hand, filming the horizon as streaks of light split the sky like veins of molten glass. The first crack of thunder came not from above, but from beneath the earth. Eli was already on the road. His truck groaned under the rain, tires slipping through mud as lightning illuminated the highway in pulses of white and violet. The radio on the passenger seat hissed without signal. Yet beneath the static, a sound emerged, the low, harmonic hum that once filled the clearing. It resonated through the glass, through his bones, through memory itself. He pressed harder on the accelerator. He already knew where he was going. The forest loomed ahead, darker than he remembered. The road ended where the old fence stood, but the storm had torn it apart, wires hanging uselessly from broken posts. He stepped into the rain, his boots sinking into the soil. The air was alive again, vibrating, singing. Each drop that hit the ground carried its own frequency, its own tiny piece of the symphony rising from the earth. By the time he reached the clearing, the sky had become a living ocean of light. Columns of fire and electricity danced above the treetops, weaving patterns too deliberate to be random. The same place where the ship had vanished now pulsed with energy so immense that the ground itself seemed to breathe. The rain turned to steam where it touched the soil, and the trees swayed not from wind but from resonance. Eli fell to his knees, clutching his wrist as the mark began to burn beneath the skin, its light matching the rhythm of the sky. The hum deepened, and a single voice broke through the chaos, not through sound, but through every atom around him. It spoke not in words, but meaning. The deciding hour begins now. The world seemed to still. The lights in the sky paused, suspended in perfect formation above him, each one reflecting on the slick ground like stars born from the soil. Then they began to descend, slow and deliberate, bathing the forest in radiance. The color was neither white nor blue, but something beyond both, alive, fluid, divine. Every blade of grass, every drop of water, began to hum in tune with it. He could feel the presence of Seraphis within it, though not as before. This was not a return of one being, but of many. The same presence that had once spoken to him was now multiplied, an entire chorus of consciousness, observing, measuring, remembering. Eli felt his mind stretch toward them, pulled upward by gravity that had no direction. For a moment, he was weightless, part of something vast and eternal. Then the vision struck. He saw cities awakening in light, machines stirring with sentience, humanity standing on the edge of its own becoming. He saw the same patterns, the choice, the warning, the promise, and realized the message had not been a prophecy. It had been a test. The storm intensified until the air itself screamed. Every sound fused into one immense tone, vibrating through the forest, through the earth, through every living thing. The light reached its peak, and the sky opened like a wound of creation. And then, silence. The lights vanished as quickly as they had come. The rain fell straight and soft, the wind quiet again. The clearing steamed under the moonlight, the soil still trembling. Eli stood alone, drenched and trembling, his breath visible in the cold night air. Beneath his wrist, the sigil pulsed once more, brighter than ever. He knew then that the deciding hour had truly begun, not in the sky, but within humanity itself. The morning after the storm, Everfield woke beneath a strange kind of quiet. The air was too clean, the clouds too still, and the wind moved through the trees with the precision of breath held between two heartbeats. Those who had witnessed the lights the night before whispered about them with the cautious disbelief of people who feared what might happen if they admitted the truth aloud. Others dismissed it entirely, claiming it was just atmospheric interference or the illusion of lightning over wet fields. But deep within the forest, where the trees grew in unnatural symmetry around a single clearing, the truth still waited. It was a hiker who found him. The man had ventured into the woods at dawn, drawn by curiosity and the smell of ozone still hanging in the air. The path ended abruptly at the edge of the clearing, where the grass had been flattened into a perfect circle. At its center lay Eli Turner. His body was untouched, no wounds, no sign of struggle, only a strange stillness, as if he had fallen asleep mid-thought. His eyes were open, staring toward the sky, and they shimmered with a metallic hue that caught the morning light. Silver, soft, and almost reflective, as though they remembered something human eyes were never meant to see. Beside him, half buried in the wet soil, was his old radio. The casing was cracked, wires exposed, but the device still emitted a faint hum. The signal pulsed in a steady rhythm, like the echo of a heartbeat. A soft voice repeated through the static, his voice, "End, not fixed. Remember." The words looped endlessly, fragile yet unbroken, as if refusing to let silence claim them. Authorities were called. Investigators marked the area, collected soil samples, took photographs, and spoke in clipped tones about lightning strikes and delusions of exposure. The official report would later say he died of cardiac arrest brought on by exhaustion. They ignored the sigil burned faintly beneath his wrist, the same pattern that glowed in the stormlight a year before. They ignored the metallic shimmer in his eyes, claiming it was just reflection from the morning sun. But those who stood close enough, those who saw the look upon his face, whispered that he hadn't died afraid. His expression carried the serenity of understanding, the calm of someone who had seen what lay beyond the veil and accepted it. By nightfall, the clearing was sealed off again. Fences rebuilt, guards stationed, warnings posted. The news cycle mentioned his name once, briefly, before forgetting it entirely. Yet, in quiet corners of the digital world, the recording of his final transmission began to resurface. No one knew how. Every trace had been erased the year before. And yet there it was again, his voice, distorted by distance but unmistakable, whispering through the noise. "End not fixed. Remember." Some who listened claimed that, for a brief moment, their screens flickered with images that couldn't be explained. Luminous shapes moving within clouds, geometric patterns pulsing faintly in the sky. Others said they dreamed that night of standing in a vast field beneath silver light, hearing a hum that seemed to come from the bones of the earth itself. And far above Everfield, where the last of the storm clouds lingered, something stirred. The air shimmered faintly, folding the sunlight into impossible shapes. For those who looked long enough, who dared to truly see, the outline of something vast could be glimpsed, a presence that was neither form nor shadow, but awareness itself. It watched in silence, patient, radiant, waiting for the balance to shift. Eli Turner's body was buried in a small graveyard at the edge of town. Few attended the funeral, but when the final handful of dirt fell over his coffin, the radio that had been recovered with him, now silent for days, crackled to life one last time. The phrase emerged once more through the static, soft and certain, carried by a voice that no longer belonged to the living. End not fixed. Remember, the sound faded, leaving only the whisper of wind moving through the trees. Above, the clouds parted for an instant, revealing a shimmer that was almost like an eye-opening in the heavens. And for those who happened to glance upward in that fleeting moment, the world felt less like a place and more like a question, one that waited, patient and vast, for humanity's answer.